This story reminds us that God doesn't need anything from us, that God gives everything to us. I think we've created religious systems where it seems like what we're trying to do is just prove to God that we care enough, that we believe enough, that we've done enough. How many of you have ever had somebody had something bad happen and somebody came along with the helpful advice? It was because of some unconfessed sin in their life, or because they didn't believe enough, or because they didn't do enough of the right thing. Anybody had that happen to you or somebody you know? And here's the thing. God doesn't need anything from you. God doesn't need you to do X enough times. God doesn't need you to pray enough so that God knows you're serious, or read the Bible enough. All those are great things that hopefully you do because they enrich your spiritual life and it helps you transform. But at the end of the day, God is not dependent on getting anything from you. At the end of the day, God's not going to be disappointed in you because you're not the one propping God up. Right? And the fact that there are still people who believe if they walk in a church building that the building might crumble down around them proves that we have operated under this doctrine that God needs something from us for far too long. Grace. Grace. What is grace? In Ephesians it says, it's by grace we're saved. And Christians love that verse, but then we turn around and say, it's by grace you're saved if you pray the prayer. And if you know the Roman road. And if you attend enough Bible studies. All right, how many of you had it's totally free, but. You know those commercials where they're like, we're going to send you one free. Just pay separate. Like that's what it sort of comes out to, right? Like you're totally loved and embraced freely as you are. But you got to do this, and this to get it. Man, come on. God doesn't need anything from us. The moments we feel like God needs something from us, there's often a ram in the thicket. Right? There's often already the thing we need isn't something we have to do this kind of quid pro quo with God. It's already there. God gives us what we need. And then this last thing, a frozen static faith is one that isn't engaged in growing. James puts it this way. Faith without works is what? Dead. Faith that isn't growing, that isn't stepping forward, that isn't becoming entangled in our flesh and blood, if it just stays in our heads, and it isn't something we're beginning to live out, and if we aren't being challenged to leave behind certain perspectives that are less than beautiful, to take steps forward to better perspectives, then what are we doing here? Like if all church is a place where we go to have our, sort of our Christian ego stroked every week, to be told how great we are, and that we believe all the right things and we're better than everybody else. Like, what is the point of that? I can do that on my own. What we're here for is to be reminded of our belovedness and to be called into the path of transformation. It's to be called to leave behind certain attitudes, actions, beliefs, and behaviors that are destructive, to step into the new thing, the gift, the goodness, the grace that this moment offers us. God doesn't need anything from us. God provides everything for us. It's a journey that is as much about unlearning as it is learning. And a faith that is just frozen and static isn't engaged in growing. And I think that most people desperately want to become different. We desperately want to become better and better and better versions of the people we are. And we'll never do that if we don't hear that voice calling us, saying, I've got work for you to do in the world. And first we're going to work on you. And then we're going to send you into the world, and you're going to work with me in the world. So let's just pause for just a second. I want to hear if there's any response to that, and then we're going to pray and head into communion together. It's like drinking out of a fire hose. I'm sorry. Cheryl? Everybody hear that? Yeah, it's beautiful. Anybody else? Karen?
This isn't very sweet or flowery, but didn't Abraham later send Hagar out to the wilderness with Ishmael?
Ishmael, yeah. Yeah, Abraham's not.
Not a very nice
He makes some poor choices. He has a son before Isaac by his wife Sarah tells him, you should just have a baby with my slave, essentially. And Abraham does, and then Sarah gets jealous. And Abraham sends them away.
Was that before or after?
I think it's prior to this. And I think what's interesting is the way that the deity says it, take your son, your only son who you love. Well, Isaac isn't his only son, but he is the only son he loves. And what you'll find Abraham's kids grow up to treat their kids that way, and their kids grow up to treat their kids that way, and it's just generation after generation of really bad parenting because they keep picking favorites in ways that, like Joseph, for example, he's the only one who gets the Technicolor dream coat. Nobody else gets it. Bad idea. Moksha.
First, thank you. That's like a completely different perspective.
I stole it from other people.
But it's
shamelessly.
It's amazing, that thing of like truly acknowledging that it's not just the same voice of God coming through and going, do this, psych.
Yeah.
But my question that I walk away with is the role of personal responsibility in relation to the voice that comes through us. Right? Because that's the thing that I think is a little bit more trickier, is like being able to truly tap into that voice, but then asking oneself what one's role is in relation to that, and what shifted for him
Yep.
to change where that voice was even coming from.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's a great question. And one of the things that I would say in response to that is, for example, if you ever hear a voice telling you to kill someone, don't. And what I mean is, hopefully that we all have, because there are times we could feel like we're being led to do a thing that could ultimately be really destructive. And what I hope we've learned over the course of human history is that it's best to do life in community, so that when somebody is weighing, I feel a draw to do this thing. What do I do? Do I do it? Do I not do it? What are the pros and cons? How do I know if it's right or wrong? And then you have a community around you to help you sort through that. And then you also have Scripture to help you sort through that. And then you have this big thing, capital T, Christian tradition, which is this ongoing thing that can help you sort through that. And then you have reason and experience and knowledge, which can help you sort through that. So we have all these things around us that hopefully we've learned. We've had enough space between us and Abraham that if somebody told one of us to sacrifice our child on an altar, we would know, okay, that's not the right voice. But sometimes when it could be step on somebody to get ahead, we tend to go with that other voice, right? And so I think part of the way you discern that personal responsibility is because you're in relationship with people who are helping you discern that personal responsibility. I don't often post anything. I'm a little bit timid about Facebook sometimes, just because I post things that and my wife's looking like, no, you're not. You should see me if I weren't, people. But one of the things I've learned is if I'm going to post something that I think, oh my gosh, this is probably going to anger somebody, I'll let a couple people read it. And if they tell me it's not good, I'll demand to know why, and then we get into a fight. But generally, and I don't post it. But there, I think having people before you make a big decision or before you make some sort of big grand statement, just saying, could a couple people, I'm angry right now, and before I do this, I'd like to bounce this off of somebody who's not angry, who can save me from myself. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of it is community. Anybody else? Let me ask you this: does this reading make sense of the story? Does it help redeem the story a bit from a story of child sacrifice to it's what it's actually doing? And Jesus goes farther. It's unteaching sacrifice. You know the thing you have to unlearn? It's inviting us to unlearn sacrifice. God doesn't need it. God doesn't want it. Jesus comes along and says, go and learn what this means. And he quotes the prophet Hosea, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. That's pretty clear, right? God doesn't need anything from us. What God's calling us to are lives of mercy and compassion. And that when we give ourselves to other people, when we give our lives away in service and love to other people, that is our sacrifice. Right? Paul in Romans 12, offer yourselves as living sacrifices. That's what we're being called to. If we won't have family ministry night this week because of fall break, but the next week, if we're back and you're interested in talking about this more, that's a great place for us to do those kind of conversations. But I hope this is, because I think what people do is they read stories like this and they're like, well, the Bible's weird and awful. No, the Bible's actually beautiful. And this story, which seems weird and awful, is actually trying to pull us forward. Because we're reading it from 2018 backward. And they were reading it from then onward. And from then, this was a massive leap forward in our understanding of what God was like. And I hope that's been helpful. So let's do this. I want to invite the band to come up, and they're going to lead us in a song as we celebrate communion. And communion is, Eucharist is this moment where we come together to realize that God's gift has been good. We remember Jesus, body broken and blood poured, not to persuade an angry deity to love us or let us off the hook, but actually Jesus gives his life away, showing us what God's love looks like in practice. Not to make God love us. Richard Rohr says Jesus didn't come to change God's mind about us. Jesus came to change our mind about God. And so today, as we take this bread and this cup, may this be a moment where we allow our minds to be changed about God, where we begin that process of letting go and unlearning what we need to let go and unlearn, and that process of learning and embracing whatever the next thing we're called to learn and embrace is. So let's stand together, and we're going to read our prayer, and then we'll celebrate.
Everybody ready? Here we go. Come to this table, you who have much faith, and you who would like to have more. You who have been here often, and you who have not been for a long time. You who have tried to follow Jesus, and you who have failed. Come. It is Christ who invites us to meet him here. And everyone said, communion is available in the back, and it is available for everybody here in the room this morning.